Hey, hello, welcome back once again to the Facebuster podcast. Lots of interesting stuff going on in the world of wrestling that we can talk about today, in WWE in particular. We are firmly on the road to Money in the Bank, an event that I am quite a big fan of. I've always enjoyed Money in the Bank and the qualification process and everything leading up to the two ladder matches to determine the man and woman WWE superstar who will walk away with the contracts to cash in at a time of their choosing on the champion of their choosing, which is a storyline that they've sort of been emphasizing a little bit more this year, I've noticed. They've mentioned how this past week Mustafa Ali was in a qualifying match, and they were talking about how he may want to use that contract if he were to win it and go down to NXT and challenge Wesley for the North American Championship. That's been a story that's been brewing up in NXT a little bit. Nothing, that's nothing new. We've seen things like that in the past. Of course, we saw Charlotte use her Royal Rumble win to challenge Rhea Ripley, who at the time was the NXT Women's Champion, and she won that title from her using her Rumble win as a chance to cash in on that. So, people taking their opportunities at championship matches via contract and using them in an unorthodox way is not a new concept, but it seems to be being talked about a little bit more this year. And it's a good idea. It's a good mechanism for creating more possibilities and speculation as to what might happen. And it's a good way to build up potentiality and possibilities. So I like that aspect that they've been adding into it. Speaking of women's champions, there's, at least on my end, a lot of confusion that has been brought up this week after we saw Asuka, who recently beat Bianca Belair to become the new Raw Women's Champion, be awarded the new title of WWE Women's Champion. It's a very simple title. No Raw, no Smackdown, which brings a lot of questions to mind for me immediately. One being, what the hell does that mean? There's a lot of what the hell being thrown around in my mind, at least, as far as what's going on with women's championships lately. And I kind of want to tackle that right off the bat. Essentially, the Raw Women's Championship was abolished, or seemingly so, and Asuka, in exchange, was awarded the new WWE Women's Championship. And that begs the question, what happens to the Smackdown Women's Championship and Rhea Ripley, who is currently the Smackdown Women's Champion? What happens to that title? Does that get abolished as well and replaced with something else? And if it is replaced with something else, what is it going to be? Now that Asuka is WWE Women's Champion, what will Rhea Ripley be? So there's a couple of possibilities that I've mulled over. Complicating things even more, before I get into what I think those possibilities are, is the fact that after Asuka was awarded this new championship, the WWE Women's Championship, we see Charlotte make her return and come out and challenge Asuka for what we think is the WWE Women's Championship, but during the segment, Charlotte seems to be focused on the discarded Raw Women's Championship, which is odd. Asuka is wearing the new WWE Women's Championship, and placed on the table beside her, where they were hiding the new championship belt, is the discarded Raw Women's Championship. And when Charlotte is talking to Asuka, she keeps referencing and pointing to wanting the Raw Women's Championship. She is not gesturing at all towards the new Women's Championship. She is pointing and gesturing and focusing on the Raw Women's Championship on the table that has seemingly been discarded. So was this a flub? Was this an error? Was Charlotte mistaken? Was it not made clear to her to point and gesture at the new title belt, the new Women's Championship? Or was she indicating that perhaps the Raw Women's Championship is not completely abolished, that it is still up for grabs. It's just it made it an even more odd situation. There's no real clear way to accomplish this transfer from Raw Women's Champion to WWE Women's Champion. But what Charlotte did and said and how she was gesturing towards the old belt just complicates things even further. So that gets, as I was talking about before, what are the possibilities for Rhea Ripley? So now that Asuka is the WWE Women's Champion, again, very simple title, very straightforward, WWE Women's Champion. That seems almost to cover the entire women's division. That seems to be the title, right? So what must Rhea be thinking? She's a women's champion too. Is it going to be WWE Women's Championship number 1 or A, and WWE Women's Championship number 2 or B? No, that's stupid, of course. So with Charlotte gesturing towards this belt, seemingly implying that this belt is going to still be active, or that it is at least still sought after by somebody like Charlotte, who maybe is offended by the fact that they're abolishing that belt or attempting to dismiss it based on whatever legacy and history she has with that belt, and she has plenty of history with that belt. Is she going to force it to remain a title? Like, if she challenges Asuka and she faces Asuka in this championship match, is she going to reject the WWE Women's Championship and opt for the Raw Women's Championship? I don't know. Very confusing. But getting back to Rhea. So what title will she have? Is it possible that they may take the Raw Women's Championship, which maybe Charlotte will win? And if she wins that belt, will Asuka remain the women's champion? Or will she give the women's championship to Charlotte, and Charlotte also takes the Raw Women's You see, this is very complicated and convoluted already. In fact, it's actually kind of hard to talk about and to explain where I'm going here, but bear with me. So if Charlotte ends up beating Asuka and she takes the Raw Women's Championship, and then going back on recent history, Charlotte and Rhea still have something, I'm sure, between them. That's maybe not a finished story. As great as their match was at WrestleMania, that story hopefully isn't finished, because they had a damn good match that night. One of the better matches on the WrestleMania card. Will they attempt to unify the Raw Women's Championship and the Smackdown Women's Championship, creating that second Women's Championship, which could be the Undisputed Women's Championship? But also with that would come a problem, because would that lower the tier of the WWE Women's Championship that Asuka currently has? Would that be the B tier, whereas the Undisputed Women's Championship, which is a unified version of the Raw and SmackDown Women's Championship, be the upper tier, the A tier, the top of the list, the top of the line? Here's another scenario. What if they do unify those belts, or maybe they just abolish them completely? Let's say what Charlotte did as far as gesturing towards the Raw Women's Championship was a mistake. She didn't mean to do that. Maybe she just flubbed it, and the Raw Women's Championship is really abolished. Perhaps what they can do is take Rhea Ripley and make her the Universal Women's Champion. Much like on the men's side, where there was originally the WWE Universal Champion, which, as we all know, was merged with the WWE Championship and became the Undisputed Universal Championship. Perhaps that's what they will do on the women's side. But also, again, that begs the question, is that the top tier, or is the Women's Championship the top tier? This mix and match and unifying and replacing of belts and making new belts, this is where it starts to get murky and complicated. Because while we have clarification sort of on the SmackDown side with Asuka. Of course, remember the question was, are they ever going to resolve the fact that Asuka is the Raw Women's Champion, but she's on SmackDown, and Rhea is the SmackDown Women's Champion on Raw? Were they ever going to fix that, as they've done in the past, where they've simply had a belt swap between the two champions? That was very simple. That was very easy to explain and to rectify. But this, by what they've done now, by introducing this new belt and kind of pushing the Raw Women's Championship to the side, it's yet to be seen what they're going to do with the SmackDown belt, what they're going to refer to Rhea Ripley as, championship-wise. I'm hoping they keep it as simple as possible. I'm hoping Charlotte acknowledging the Raw Women's Championship the way that she did on SmackDown was an error. I hope, because that would just make it so much easier. If Asuka can just be the WWE Women's Champion, then Rhea, I think the best case scenario is to just call her the Universal Women's Champion. Again, there are complications with that. That is the simplest version to me as it plays out in my head. But the caveat there is, well, then certainly Asuka would have issues with that. Because linguistically speaking, Asuka should take issue with that. Because Universal Women's Champion seems to overtake just regular old Women's Champion. It just sounds bigger. It just sounds greater. It sounds like the greater championship to hold. So that would create, maybe, tension between Asuka and Rhea. Though they are across the border, brand-wise, being on SmackDown and Raw, that could create some drama to, crossover between shows where Asuka takes issue with Rhea automatically being given this greater title than Asuka receives. Let's be honest, does it fucking matter? It's clearly the way WWE has treated this draft so far. We've seen so many people crossing over. And I know Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn can go wherever they want because of the tag team titles. And I know the women's tag team champions can go wherever they want to defend their shit too. But we've seen a lot of crossing over. We've seen AJ Styles show up on Raw. We've seen, not free agents, but people have been drafted to certain shows, show up on other shows as of late for whatever reasons. Like they don't even give a shit about the draft anymore. It's already done. Like anybody can go anywhere. Who cares? So, something like that creating issues between Asuka and Rhea could be interesting. Or if Charlotte is the champion at the time, there's a story in place for that already. Charlotte and Rhea Ripley, who have recent history given their battle at WrestleMania. So I hope you were able to follow all of that word soup that I just spilled out of my mouth regarding these championships. WWE is not helping me in that regard as far as trying to explain my predictions for what they're going to do moving forward with the women's championships. But I think you can understand what I'm trying to say here. Something as simple as Charlotte perhaps flubbing and messing up and pointing at the wrong championship just completely disintegrates any simplicity that would be, involved with this transfer of championships, this changing of championships. It's just a possible tiny little botch like that in a promo could have completely blown up my train of thought regarding that. But whatever happens with Rhea and her championship, which I'm sure we'll find out about on Raw, or I hope to God we find out about on Raw, it will clarify a lot. And they can't just have women's champion 1 and 2 and A and B. It's got to be something more than that. I'm anticipating it being the WWE Universal Women's Champion, and I'm assuming that's going to be Rhea Ripley. Furthermore, while on the topic of Charlotte, of course we saw her return from her biannual hiatus She came out to challenge Asuka for the women's championship. She says, I'm not standing in line. I should get the shot right away. That riled up Bianca Belair, who previously had mentioned to Adam Pearce, maybe like 5 seconds before that segment took place, that she should get a rematch. And Adam Pearce agreed with her that she would be next in line. So that further complicates things. Bianca's going to get involved in this somehow. Is it just me, or does in that segment with Adam Pearce, did Bianca seem a little bit different? She was speaking a little bit differently. Her attitude seemed a little bit different. I can't help but wonder, as I've speculated recently, that perhaps Bianca is undergoing a slow roll into a character change. Maybe she is angling more towards a heelish, arrogant character, which I would love to see because she played it really well in NXT. And I think with all the experience she's had as a face since that time in NXT, she would be even better now as a heel than she was in NXT. Of course, at Backlash, we saw her take on that role in what was a seemingly very veteran move. She listened to the crowd. She knew that the crowd was behind Io Sky. Io Sky as well responded very well to that. They both kind of switched roles instantly in the ring. They knew what to do. Bianca, she just seemed a little bit more cocky and not whiny, but like demanding in that segment with Adam Pearce. She was wearing the all black outfit. I don't know, that's like a Braun Breaker heel move, you know what I mean? So perhaps we could be seeing a more dastardly Bianca Belair, and I would like that personally. But on Charlotte, I've mentioned this before. Of course, she's going to be slingshotted to the front of the line. It's Charlotte Flair, but also I've mentioned a few times while doing this podcast that I believe WWE firmly wants Charlotte as quickly as possible to reach the 16 World Championship mark. They want to get her to that magic number of 16 and probably surpass it. But 16 is the magic number. They want her to get to that as quickly as possible because they want to do a big spiel. They want a big celebration, probably involving Ric Flair, maybe John Cena. But for her to get to that magic 16, that record-tying 16 World Championship mark, so that they can make a big to-do about it. And rightfully so. I mean, it's quite an accomplishment. Let's be real, they've hot potato titles on and off Charlotte so often that it was easier for her to get to 16 than Ric Flair, frankly, and obviously John Cena. But they want to do that celebration with Charlotte, especially with Ric Flair still around and healthy enough to be in attendance and to participate in the celebration. It would be a big moment. It would be an historic thing. And if we take a look at the recent pattern in WWE, it's that they've been wanting to make new records. They've been wanting to reset old records. That's been something that they've been doing a lot of. You look at Bianca's record-setting title reign that recently ended, but she did break the record. You look at Gunther's record-setting Intercontinental Championship reign. You look at Wesley. He's now the longest reigning North American champion in NXT. And obviously the big one being Roman Reigns, who's breaking previously thought to be unbreakable records in his 1,000-day plus reign with the main championships. They want more of this, and why not? They're so close with Charlotte. Let's just get it done. She's going to break the record, clearly. So let's just get her to 16 as fast as possible. And I think this is, unfortunately for Asuka, going to be a short reign. I think Charlotte's probably going to end up taking the title from her sooner or later. I don't know if it's going to be in the first match. I think that matchup is actually tentatively scheduled for SmackDown. I'm not sure they would do it on SmackDown. I imagine them wanting to save one for a premium live event, maybe Money in the Bank, maybe SummerSlam. But you know what? Now, just sitting here talking about it, it would make sense for them to have Charlotte beat Asuka on SmackDown right away, and then maybe Asuka or maybe Bianca gets a rematch and Charlotte has a short reign, but that would get her that much closer to 16 that much faster, right? So hot potato this title right off the bat. It's within the realm of possibility, and I think that's what they have in mind for Charlotte. I've been saying it for a while. They want to get her to 16 and beyond. They want to have that celebration. They want to make new records. They have this thing lately, I swear, I know you guys are seeing it too, where they want to reset all of these old records and put the names and faces of modern day superstars in the record books as the record holders for these records. It's a way to freshen up their history. You know, get the old heads off the history books. They've held those records for long enough. Let's get our modern crop of superstars in these record books. It just makes WWE as a promotion look better if they have modern superstars breaking those records. Not that like the North American Championship has like a long historic history. It's been around for a handful of years, but they just want their newer guys, their newer crop, their homegrown superstars to own those records, as opposed to people that maybe aren't alive or haven't been associated with WWE for years. They want their new guys and girls to be in those record books. They want to be able to talk about that in storylines, how these recent WWE superstars were the old record holder and now, so and so is going for that record and blah blah blah. So this is just another one of those things where it's not necessarily in line with resetting the record books. This would be a new record because it would be a women's champion, not a men's champion. She's not technically breaking Ric Flair's record or technically breaking John Cena's record. She's just putting her name in that echelon alongside of them, but in the women's division, the 16-time world women's champion or whatever. So that's what I see happening sooner than later with Charlotte and one of these titles, be it Asuka's women's championship or Rhea Ripley's presumably universal undisputed galaxy women's champion number 2. Fuck it. Let's just call it women's champion number 2 for now. No, I think it will be the Universal Women's Champion. I haven't heard anybody mention that yet. I haven't even really heard any speculation on Rhea Ripley's championship and what it's going to be referred to and replaced with. You heard it here first, my friend. Universal Women's Champion, Rhea Ripley. Book it. Take note. Write it down. Keeping in line, though, with confusion regarding women's championships. Not really confusion, but there's some questions in the air regarding the NXT Women's Tag Team Championships. Of course, during the draft, we saw Alba Fire and Isla Dawn, the current reigning NXT Women's Tag Team Champions, be drafted to the main roster, and questions were abound immediately in my head. There was no question when they drafted NXT Women's Champion Indy Hartwell what was going to happen. She right off the bat relinquished the belt, a tournament was announced, and you know the story there. But the story we were told is that Isla Dawn and Alba Fire are bringing those NXT Women's Tag Team Championships to the main roster with them. I mentioned on a couple of occasions this draft, with the draft of those champions, Isla Dawn and Alba Fire, and Kaden Carter and Katana Chance, to the main roster left 0 effing women's tag teams in NXT. My immediate thought was they were either going to hold them on the main roster until NXT rushed together some new women's tag teams, because again there were 0 left, or that they were going to unify them. You can go back and listen to the episodes if you don't believe me. I've been saying it. They're going to unify those fucking championships. And wouldn't you know it, this past week we get the announcement and the challenge. Shayna Baszler and Ronda Rousey want to unify their tag team championships, the main roster women's tag team championships, with the NXT tag team championships. But I took great appreciation in the fact that before this unification was even announced, we had Wade Barrett on commentary when Alba Fire and Isla Dawn came out. Finally mention it on television. He said something along the lines of, once Alba Fire and Isla were called up and they were done with NXT, they brought the tag team championships, the NXT tag team championships, with them because they had obliterated the NXT women's tag team division to the point where there were no tag teams left. My guy, Wade, maybe he's been listening to the old Facebuster podcast. I don't know. But finally, it was vocalized on television. There are no NXT women's tag teams left. And yes, with a few new storyline developments recently, and the fact that we've seen, since their jobber spot on Smackdown a few weeks ago, Valentina Feroz and, gosh, I always forget her name, Alicia Leon, I think is her name, back on NXT in the Women's Battle Royal. Yes, it does appear that a few more women's tag teams are cropping up in NXT finally. But up to that point, there were zero. And thank you, Wade Barrett, for finally acknowledging it on television. WWE finally acknowledged it and gave that as the reason why they're unifying these belts. Look, tag team divisions are tricky. They're always tricky. It's always difficult to manage and cultivate because tag teams take time to develop. WWE and other promotions, I'm sure, but WWE has had this weird thing about just mashing two random people together and calling them a tag team and expecting us to be okay with it. There's no story behind it. There's no tenure behind it. There's no history behind the two that they're mashing together. It's just, well, here's two people. We just need a fucking tag team. Here's Raquel Gonzalez and Liv Morgan. And now here's Raquel Gonzalez and Shotzi. Just deal with it. It doesn't work that way. There's got to be more complexity to those stories, man. That's why I do like Alba Fire and Isla Dawn, because they make sense paired together. They look like a team. They perform like a team, and they have history with each other. It fits. It works. Even Caden Carter and Katana Chance work as a tag team because of their tenure and their longevity. At first, it may have seemed like they were slammed together, but it's not like it was just a 1 week, 2 week, 1 month, 2 month thing. They stuck together, they formed chemistry and continuity with each other, and now they're a legitimate team. So where story is lacking, where history is lacking, if you have a tag team that visually kind of does make sense, and they do make sense even when they were mashed together, because they're both, diminutive and it just physically they look like they'd make a team because they're, like I said, a little bit smaller, and that story in itself works a little bit. But where story lacks as far as tag team creation, tenure and longevity is what fixes that, is what makes that tag team eventually work. And at this point, Carter and Chance have been together for so long that they are a tag team. It is legitimate. They now have a legitimate story behind them. They are now a legitimate tag team because they've been together for so long. That's where tenure and longevity come in and make up for lack of story at the beginning of the tag team formation. So yes, forming tag teams is difficult. It's like planting seeds, right? It's not an overnight thing. You gotta let it grow. You gotta water it. You gotta fertilize it. You gotta put it in the right spot at the right time in the right weather during the right season and all this different shit. It has to work in conjunction with each other, or else it's just a random shitstorm that nobody wants to see and it doesn't make sense. And frankly, we are offended because you've insulted our intelligence thinking that you could just mash two random things together, call it a team and expect us to be like, it's a tag team. It's two of them, so of course it's a tag team. Sure. No, it's difficult. It's far more complex than getting over one single superstar. So while yes, it is difficult to maintain and cultivate a tag team division, it's something that you have to continually work on. And if they're going to start doing that, that's cool. And I see them starting to do that a little bit more. Alba Fire and Isla Dawn, Chance and Carter. You got Chelsea Green and Sonya Deville, which I really like as a team because they make sense together. Their stories and gimmicks are in line with each other. And that's where story overcomes lack of longevity and tenure. It's the other way around. Their stories together make sense. They're like extremely similar characters, so it makes sense. But when you're just like, here's a tall powerhouse woman with Liv Morgan, who is whatever the fuck she is, it's just, what is that? Raquel and Shotzi, what is that? Tall powerhouse, punky alternative goth girl, what is that? If they keep working on it, they should be fine. But there is no need for them to have two separate tag team championship belts. It's just, unify them. It makes the most sense. NXT is, maybe one day they could have that again, but they don't need it right now. Sure, there not being NXT Women's Tag Team Championships sort of complicates the reason behind having any female tag teams in NXT, but it's also, they could phrase it like, look, on the main roster there are Women's Tag Team Championships, so work on your craft here as a tag team, and eventually maybe you'll get a shot up there at those belts. It's going to be a difficult story to tell, and it's going to be difficult to justify forming a female tag team down in NXT since there's technically really nothing to fight for, being there's no championships, but just phrase it as you're working your way here up to the main roster. One day, if you work hard enough here as a tag team on the main roster, you will have a chance at Tag Team Championship Gold. So, simple as that. But word is that in their first match on main roster televised programming, Caden Carter and Katana Chance did impress the higher-ups in WWE, and rightfully so. They had a really solid match against Rousey and Baszler. I'll be honest, I wasn't too high up on Chance and Carter in NXT. Their innovative offense is fun to watch, sure. I just was never too sure about them as far as captivating any sort of interest. I like the concert going rave girl gimmicks that they had never really hit me right. It didn't seem that interesting, but if they can find a little bit more depth on the main roster, I'd be fine with watching them and being a fan of them. And I thought their match on the main roster against Rousey and Baszler was good enough that I could invest in them somewhat and hope that they find some character depth up on the main roster. And it's yet to be. It was their first match. Apparently, it impressed the people that it needed to impress in WWE. They'll obviously have opportunities moving forward. Again, the way that the NXT talent have been treated on this round of draft call-ups has been much better, has fared much better in the short term so far under Triple H. Just imagine if any of these guys and girls had come up previously, in previous years, where Vince McMahon was just ready, willing, and able to bury NXT superstars on arrival. Imagine how a team like Carter and Chance would be received and reflected on television immediately. It would not be going as well as it is. So there is hope for them. And they did a good job. That was a good match that they had on TV in their first go-around on the main roster. So I'll give it to them. But keeping on the women's side of things, we see Bayley and Io Sky have both advanced to the Women's Money in the Bank match. And I think this makes for some great potential fuckery between the two. Again, if you've been listening, I've been championing for a split. I want Damage Control to be done with Dakota Kai out and injured. I don't know if that makes things easier or more difficult as far as splitting this group up, but Bayley and Io in the same match vying for the same Money in the Bank briefcase could advance this potential split between the two. And again, my desired feud of the future is Asuka and Io. And I've seen that be brought up more and more online in recent weeks. I think other people want it too. And this could serve as a vehicle for getting them to finally turn on each other. And I think Io's going to be the one to snap and just take out her frustrations on Bayley. We've seen Bayley ruin opportunities for her. We saw her fuck up her opportunity at Backlash when she was trying to help her beat Bianca. She was trying to help Io beat Bianca, but she got a little overzealous, ended up fucking shit up, and Io lost because of it. Ever since then, Io's been looking at Bayley a little differently, been giving her the side eye, and has been seemingly frustrated in backstage interviews and segments she does with Bayley. I expect at least a little bit more tension to bubble to the surface in this Money in the Bank ladder match, where they will both be in it at the same time. I assume they'll work together at first, and then maybe it comes down to those two at the end of the night. Maybe we see a face-off at the top of the ladder between the two, but I kind of expect with these two advancing, something's got to give there. I think at Money in the Bank we're going to see some Damage Control infighting, and it may finally get physical between the two. That is at least what I'm hoping to see. But we'll find out at Money in the Bank. So another interesting tidbit we saw we didn't see it happen on Raw, but it happened during Monday Night Raw, just after the cameras turned off and Monday Night Raw went off the air. Of course, on screen, we saw Seth Rollins defeat Damian Priest in his first heavyweight championship title defense. But what happened after the show went off the air was the interesting thing to me. If you've seen at all on the internet the video going around of the post-match handshake between Seth Rollins and Damian Priest, that sort of adds some intrigue to what's going on with Judgment Day lately, at least as far as Damian Priest and Finn Balor go. We saw during the show when Seth and Damian were in the ring talking shit to each other. The challenge was made by Seth to fight him like a man and come to the ring and do it without Judgment Day. And Damian Priest agreed. And Finn Balor was kind of like, what the fuck, my guy? Like, I could help. You know how we roll. Like, Damian Priest took the high road, agreed to not have Finn Balor there. And as promised, he didn't have Finn Balor there. But Finn Balor, on his own volition, showed up at some point in the match, tried to interfere. Damian Priest actually was like, dude, like, what are you doing here? And, Seth Rollins goes on the win, but in the post-Raw segment that we didn't see on TV, Seth Rollins invites Damian Priest back into the ring to shake his hand, and Damian Priest does it. He comes back down the ramp, gets in the ring, hesitates for a moment, but he shakes Rollins' hand, and that kind of got me to thinking. So I wonder if the WWE is thinking about separating Damian Priest, because Damian Priest has a lot of momentum behind him following the Bad Bunny stuff. I don't know if he really needs a faction anymore, at least for the time being. Maybe he can split off from Judgment Day and do his own thing. He would make a great face, I think, at the moment. Not that it necessarily matters, but a real stand-up face thing to do, going back to shake Seth Rollins' hand, kind of spitting in the face of Finn Balor a little bit. And what's been happening lately, so the rumor was that WWE was looking to add a new member to the Judgment Day. And nowhere in that rumor did it mention perhaps it's also looking to deduct a member from the Judgment Day. So a couple of weeks back, we saw JD McDonough in a backstage segment post beating the shit out of Dolph Ziggler after the Battle Royal to determine the number one contender to Gunther's IC Championship. And during that backstage segment with JD McDonough, we saw as he was leaving the arena, leaving to the parking lot, Finn Balor from up above in the rafters or like some sort of elevated whatever ramp, I don't know. But he came out into view and watched JD as he left. Most of us know the extensive history between Finn Balor and JD McDonough. JD McDonough was trained when he was Jordan Devlin. JD McDonough / Jordan Devlin was trained by Finn Balor. They're both from Ireland. They both have a extensive history, and my speculation was that JD McDonough, who would fit perfectly into a group like this, by the way, would be that new member of Judgment Day. So with the recent happenings with Damian Priest and sort of shunning the desire of Judgment Day to be sneaky and conniving and help him out in that match against Seth Rollins, perhaps this creates a divide and further cracks the relationship between Damian Priest and Finn Balor and Judgment Day. Perhaps this sets the stage for McDonough to sort of make his way into Judgment Day via Finn Balor. Finn Balor introduces him into the group, and perhaps Finn Balor and JD start to form a bond, and Damian Priest starts to, this starts to make things uneasy between Priest and Balor in a way. Like the JD McDonough could be the wedge that is driven in between Priest and the rest of Judgment Day. And that history between McDonough and Balor is ultimately what leads them to be kind of closer in relationship to each other in the Judgment Day, leaving Damian Priest as maybe sort of a castaway, like he feels almost isolated or alienated from the Judgment Day because of this close relationship. They start to bond, and maybe they turn on Damian Priest in light of his recent un-Judgment Day-like attitude. But that's how I kind of see this playing out. That's how I'm going to predict it moving forward. I think JD McDonough is ultimately going to join Judgment Day, and I think this might spell the end for Damian Priest and Judgment Day. We'll see, but I think there are some changes coming to Judgment Day pretty soon. The Bloodline drama continues to escalate. Of course, we see the drama playing out between the two brothers, the Usos. Solo Sikoa taking out Jimmy this past week on SmackDown after he came out to help his brother, Jay, in his match against Austin Theory. So they're kind of drawing this out a little bit longer. I have no problem with it. This is sort of a new development in the whole Bloodline thing. Of course, a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking on the fact that they were just kind of resting on their laurels as far as tension in the Bloodline goes, and they finally escalated it at Night of Champions, which I was glad to see. So they're just continuing to play off that. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I'm glad to see them finally start to escalate this story into something beyond. And of course, we see Sami Zayn continue to try to get in the ear of Jay. I really like that. I hope at some point we see a partnership between Jay, at least, and Sami Zayn and maybe Kevin Owens. But it looks to be the direction they're headed. I just like what I'm seeing. I'm glad it's changing up a bit, and I'm glad they escalated that story finally at Night of Champions. And it's interesting to see where they're going off of it. Next week on SmackDown, Roman Reigns is going to return. He's going to be there in person, so we should see some new developments as far as that goes. But as for this week, I like Solo attacking Jimmy. I like the end of show drama with Jimmy trying to console Jay and Jay kind of pushing him off and going up the ramp, kind of pushing away Heyman and Solo. Jay's kind of got some shit to think about and to mull over, and I think we'll ultimately probably see a more significant development on SmackDown this coming week. But as far as main roster stuff goes, that's pretty much it. Let's quickly delve into some NXT stuff. Of course, we saw Blair Davenport. She was revealed to be the mystery attacker. of course, a couple weeks ago had speculated on Blair Davenport being that mystery attacker. It just fits her mysterious, villainous character that she's portrayed in the past. So I'm glad that was finally brought to light. I'm glad she is back. And I think the pairing with her and Tatum Paxley is going to be interesting. Part of me wishes Alba Fire and Isla Dawn were still in NXT because I think those two plus Davenport and Tatum Paxley would be an interesting foursome as far as a women's faction goes. They all kind of have developed these dark, mysterious, weird, witchy, evil characters. Tatum Paxley less than the other three, but ever since she split from Ivy Nile and was kind of being fucked with by Alba Fire and Isla Dawn, she's kind of gone a little bit more odd and dark, and I think she's going to continue to develop into that same sort of character. I'd like to see those four together as like a witchy foursome faction. I think that would be cool. I noticed Wes Lee, who was interacting with Mustafa Ali on NXT this week, had no problem with potentially giving him an opportunity at his North American Championship. So apparently, as far as I've noticed, Wes Lee seems to be okay with anyone he is friendly with wanting a chance at his title except Tyler Bate. I think that's a little strange. I still go back on how that it was just odd of him to be so offended that Tyler Bate would want a title shot for his championship. Like, why the fuck wouldn't he? I still feel like that made Wes look weird, a little awkward. I don't know. I didn't like the way that was handled. I know they needed something to get Tyler involved in that, but I don't think that was the way, man. That just didn't make any sense to me. We have a new name, or a name, for Noam Dar's faction. They are the Metaphor, which, as a fan of wordplay, I'm okay with. This whole faction is odd to me still. Hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense as it continues to develop, but what a strange crew this is. Interesting to see how they do moving forward. Eddie Thorpe, still a little boring to me. I'm so sorry to say that. I know he's good, but just he needs something more than Damon Kemp. More, I don't know if he needs a faction himself, or a tag team partner, or a manager, or a valet. I don't know, but I continue to be underwhelmed by Eddie Thorpe. It's just bland to me. I hate to say that. I know he's good. It just hasn't captured me in the right way yet. The Reggie / Scripps thing. Um, so Thea Hale won the Battle Royal to get the next shot against Tiffany Stratton for the Women's Championship in NXT. I think that's cool. Thea Hale, I'm sure she rubs some people the wrong way. I kind of like her weird, intense character that she's got going on. It's kind of amusing to me. I'd like to see her do well. She's still very young. She's still very green. As far as the Chase U thing goes, I'm starting to enjoy Duke Hudson a little bit more in that angle. I think he's kind of funny as well. But Thea Hale gets her opportunity coming up. And after this match, after the Battle Royal, we saw the Chase U celebration, which brought us our first glimpse at the Cavender twins, the highly touted Cavender twins. They just came out. I don't know if they're in Chase U, but they just oddly and awkwardly were there to celebrate with Thea Hale with no backstory whatsoever. So they were given the Chase U hand gesture while they held Thea Hale on her shoulders. I don't know if that indicates that they have joined the University of Chase, but it was odd. I know people are excited to see these two. You know, we know their athletic background. Obviously, they're capable of probably developing into professional wrestlers, hopefully. But just having them there out of nowhere was a little bit strange to me. So we'll see if they're actual Chase U students in the coming weeks. And I think the most interesting part of NXT this week was Braun Breaker challenging Seth Rollins to come to NXT and defend his World Heavyweight Championship against him. That could be very fun. That is not a match I've thought about yet. I didn't even have Seth and Braun in the same frame of mind as far as potential future matches go. So that could be interesting. Obviously, Seth's not going to deny that, so I think we're going to see Seth Rollins in NXT at some point in the near future. I think that could be a fun match, a fun mix of different styles, and I think Seth could probably teach Braun a thing or two about developing his character, and I think that will be a fun matchup, and I'm eager to see it. Other than that, that's about as much as I got for this week. I rambled quite a bit about confusion regarding championships and unifications and new titles and oh god. If you followed in entirety what I was saying about the women's championships earlier, good for you. Like, congratulations. If you didn't develop a headache after that, because I know I kind of did just talking about it, again, congratulations. Thank you for bearing with me in that. It's something that the WWE is they've just muddied the waters a little bit. They've made things a little murky and complicated as far as what's going to happen next. Charlotte and her potential botch of pointing at the Raw Women's Championship does not help at all. But if it's a Easter egg of what they're going to do in the future, like the Raw Women's Championship's still going to be a thing, but there's still this new WWE Women's Championship, but also what's Rhea's Championship going to be called, and is the Smackdown Championship going to also be a thing with the Raw Women's Championship if it does remain a thing, and yeah. But the whole Reggie and Scripps things, right? You guys, that whole thing. Yeah. Fuck. Anyways, thank you again for listening. Thanks for joining me. I will be back around the same time next week talking about hopefully less confusing shit as we continue on the road to Money in the Bank. Thank you again. Please, do the thing, do the YouTube thing, press the buttons, comment, say some shit, subscribe or whatever, push the thumbs up dealy bob. Whatever you want to do, that's on you. But I'm out of here. Thanks again for listening. We'll talk again soon. Until then, ladies and gentlemen,